Daily Fantasy Edge. Of course, I'm your host, Peter Jennings. I go by CSURAM88 across the daily fantasy industry. And as always, joined by Adam Levitan and Al Zeidenfeld, a.k.a. Smiz, a.k.a. Smiz Life. Adam, I loved your solo pod this last week. You got into a lot of good stuff. I did think week one was pretty predictable. There was obviously some things, but overall a predictable slate. How are you feeling about week two as we record here on Thursday morning?
Yeah, I think as a whole, kind of the slate got messed up on DraftKings by the 4 Monday games and the salary situation. We're going to talk about that, but some of the salaries are just way off for the guys that played on Monday, and that's going to mess up the slate, and some people will consider it a messed up slate because of that. But, you know, it is what it is. Everybody's playing with the same salaries, obviously. More importantly, though, we were sponsored by a different company, sexually enhanced company last week. We're going to be talking a little bit more team sex later in the ads this week. So a little teaser there for you guys for the ad. And most importantly, the Listener League. It did not hashtag make it bigger, but it did not hashtag made it smaller. They hashtag kept it the same. And by keeping it the same, it remains the best tournament on DraftKings. This is, of course, the Listener League. That is the best tournament on DraftKings. $10 buy-in, 3-entry max, no rake, $7,500 to first, $100K guaranteed, flat payouts. Man, oh man, what a tournament. And man, it's like, I mean, especially like in week two, some of the tournaments that DraftKings ran in week one is like promos aren't up this week. I mean, it's just so by far the best tournament on DraftKings. If you guys wanted them to not make it smaller, just go ahead and fill it.
Al, you have to be thrilled. We filled it. It seems like you had a somewhat solid week. You've been doing TV. You're out in LA. You're living the full-blown Smiz life. What's going on?
I had a solid content week, and if I had listened to that smart guy that was on Daily Wager last Friday who had a good cash game lineup, I wouldn't have had the donkey lineup that I had in last week's four-man.
Yeah. We all scored within a point, by the way, I think, right?
Yeah, that sucked. Yeah. The smart guy that was on Daily Wager would have had about 190, but the donkey that put in a lineup on Sunday morning altered that lineup and went with Kelsey over Ingram, which went with Chubb over CMC, and that's 50-point swing. So, GG.
Yeah. We were on some guys, some bad chalk last week, and I don't feel bad about Kelsey and Kittle, who I was really heavy on. Kittle, 2 touchdowns overturned. Kelsey, the victim of a no-look pass gone wrong. Adam, any other news and notes before we dive into the games?
Nope. Let's do it.
All right. Well, let's dive in. First game on the slate, very relevant. We have the Cardinals at Ravens. Now, the Cardinals ran a play every 22 seconds on offense. We're the fast-paced team that a lot of people projected coming into this season with the new coaching staff, going against the Ravens, who just embarrassed the Dolphins, which I tweeted out. I think the Dolphins are going to be like the Coors Field of the NFL going forward. So, Lamar Jackson obviously in play here. What are the other news and notes?
Yeah, I think some of the Arizona stuff is skewed. I mean, as kind of we suspected and feared, they were getting trucked for like 3/4 of that game. So, of course, they're going to run a play every 22 seconds. And I don't take that to mean that they're not going to play fast going forward. They don't want to play fast, but I think they got really sped up and the game goes to overtime. They ran way more plays. They ran way more 10 personnel than even they wanted to. So, yeah, I'm still very skeptical on the efficiency of Arizona, especially, you know, shout out to people now think, I guess this is like my thing or whatever. You know, a lot of the data has proven this wrong, but I still like to think about it. Arizona plays an overtime game, late on Sunday game, short week, first game across the country, 10 a.m. Pacific time, and just, I just don't think it's a great spot for Arizona. I will say Jimmy Smith and Tavon Young, 2 of the Ravens' better corners, are out for this game. And yeah, you mentioned Lamar. I mean, I expect Lamar to be the highest owned quarterback by a decent margin.
The Cardinals could have played a morning game without overtime and been at home this week, and this would have been a bad spot for this Cardinals offense against Baltimore. That defense is just mean. They're nasty. They're going to... Okay, you have 2 ends of the spectrum here. You have the team that wants to play the fastest in the league, and they're playing up against the team that wants to essentially be one of the slowest paced teams in the league and bleed the clock and run the football and just take you completely out of it, hold it for 40 minutes a game. When you have situations like that, the slow-paced team is going to play a little bit faster. They're going to get some extra plays because of how fast the fast team plays. And the fast team is going to get a few less plays than they want because of the pace of play and everything of the slow pace team. And it comes down to who is going to enforce their will upon the other team. And right now, I don't see any way that the Ravens aren't going to be the ones who dictate the way that this game is played.
Yeah, the Ravens are going to be very chalky just in general, specifically Lamar Jackson. Mark Ingram, I was pretty encouraged with his usage. It's hard to really dive into all the snap data and everything because it was such a blowout with the Ravens, but Mark Ingram looks like another good option. And then with the receivers, I think I might prefer Boykin this week in tournaments just from an ownership standpoint, Adam. Everyone saw Hollywood Brown go absolutely nuts, but he had all that production with limited snaps and really came into the game somewhat questionable. He's been battling a lot of different injuries. So your thoughts if you're going to go with a pass catcher? Andrews is obviously another option, although tight end is pretty stacked this week.
Yeah, I think that people are getting sharper and they realize that Hollywood Brown only ran 8 routes last week. He had like 127-2 on 8 routes. So I think people are getting sharper and they won't play him as much as you think. And yeah, I think Andrews will be the most popular pass catcher with Lamar.
I can confirm from the YouTube comments that people are not getting sharper and they think that Marquise says that Hollywood Brown is the man.
But those, no offense to the YouTube dolts, but the YouTube dolts aren't putting in. They're not putting in a lot of money on DraftKings, I would bet.
I'm just saying that in our bubble of people who, we study a lot and we pay attention to the right stuff, and the people that we're surrounded with pay attention to the right stuff. And hopefully the 7 people, maybe a couple more now, that listen to this podcast pay attention to the right stuff, but the majority of people don't.
Mm-hmm. Ravens implied for 29.5 points, which is second highest on the slate. So a lot of equity, and I think Lamar Jackson is the chalk option, and you can get a little more creative potentially in tournaments. Let's move on to the next game, which is the Cowboys at Redskins. And one of the things I feel really good about personally last week was being heavy on the Cowboys, was on Dak and Cash and leagues around the industry, had a ton of Gallup, and Amari Cooper looked really, really good. Now going against the Redskins, who played really well. I was surprised at how well the Redskins played, specifically on offense versus the Eagles last week, Adam. What are the news and notes, and how are you attacking this game?
Yeah, Darius Guice unfortunately hurt his knee again. He's out. They're going to go back to Adrian Peterson, which is just an absolute joke. Jordan Reed remains in the concussion protocol. And from a Zeke workload standpoint, he did play 37 snaps last week, even though they were absolutely trucking the Giants. I suspect Zeke will play even more. So, yeah, I mean, I understand the Redskins played well. Dallas is really good on both sides of the ball. And I don't think anybody on Washington will be too popular outside of maybe Terry McLaurin, who, there's a few things that will surprise me with DraftKings pricing. McLaurin being priced less than like Trey Quinn and Paul Richardson was one after what McLaurin did in week 1 doesn't mean that he's a great play. It just means he should be more expensive than those guys.
Well, he's definitely going to be out there, right? I mean, that's one thing that we did learn. He was out there, 97% of snaps in week 1?
Yep.
I mean, you can run that up the flagpole at 3,800. Obviously, his day was buoyed by that really nice 69-yard touchdown, but the volume was okay without it. 4 catches on 6 targets without that long touchdown. He ended with 5 on 7 targets for 125 yards, the bulk of it coming on the long TD. But if he's going to be out there all the time and be an option and be somebody that's actually in the target tree, you would think that as the season rolls on, his numbers aren't going to get worse as he gets more game experience. And then eventually the starting job goes from, Case Keenum to his college quarterback.
Yeah.
Shower narrative.
With those
the shower narrative in play down the road.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this Dallas offense. Michael Gallup, shout out to CSU, 7 catches on 7 targets, 158 yards. And keep in mind, Dallas was blowing out this Giants team, so they really kind of slowed down in the second half. But basically, the Cowboys offense was completely unstoppable. Dak Prescott looked amazing. And from the eye test, in the offseason, the preseason, and now seeing the footage of Michael Gallup, he has made a huge leap. And they have a great offensive line. They have Zeke, they have Dak. With Gallup and Amari out there, it's just very hard for defenses to figure out who they're going to kind of key in on to stop. Adam, if you had to choose between Gallup and Cooper, where would you go?
Stop asking me these direct 1v1 questions.
Who do you have in cash, Gallup or Cooper or none?
I'll say this about Dallas, man. Kellen Moore, like, we're going to talk about some other coaching changes that made a big impact. I think you can very clearly tell that Kellen Moore made a big impact on Dallas.
Okay, but here's my question moving forward. Yes, they looked amazing through the air last week, but was that a specific game plan with a limited Zeke Elliott? And are we now going to see a little bit of a different sort of game plan with, instead of 12 touches or whatever that Zeke got in week 1, now are we looking towards more of the 25 touch Zeke from last year, where maybe those DAC numbers come down, those deep attempts come down, or are they going to play off of that with play action?
Why would they go away? Dak was so freaking good last week.
Because they have Ezekiel Elliott. They're not going to give him the ball 13 times anymore. Like, if that is the new Zeke, a 14-touch Zeke?
They just, for some reason, paid him for freaking forever. I would want to, if I was Dallas now, I'd want to be protecting an asset that I invested a lot of money into, especially at a position where we know tread on the tires is very important. So I think if I'm Dallas, I'm leveraging this amazing passing game as much as I can. Obviously, you still want to run, but maybe that's my bias because I'm so high on Gallup and Cooper. But I think this is a really good offense. What do you think, Al?
I mean, I'm just glad that we just booked a mortgage bet on Ezekiel Elliott having over 14 touches this week. Good.
Yeah,
I got a guest room ready for you.
That didn't just happen. All right. Well, let's keep it moving here because we do have quite a few games on the slate. Next game is the Colts at Titans. Two of the running backs I was really high on coming into the year, Marlon Mack and Derrick Henry, both went off. But I do respect both defenses. Maybe the Colts a little less. They have some injuries now on the defensive side, Adam.
Yeah, from a skill position standpoint, I don't really see many injuries. It's just a case of two teams, I think, who want to hide their quarterback more than anything. I mean, the Colts want to hide Brissett, and the Titans, I don't think, want Mariota to be really unleashed either. So, I thought A.J. Brown looked good in week 1. Obviously, Marlon Mack looked good in week 1. I think this will probably go extremely under-owned this game. I don't see people being excited to really play anyone in this game whatsoever.
Al, are you excited about Derrick Henry or Marlon Mack? T.Y. Hilton?
Not really. I mean, it's not the week. Yes, I'm excited about their season-long, like down the road, there will be opportunities to play these guys. I think that there are enough really, really good players in really, really good matchups this week at discounted prices to not have to sweat this game. There's spots you can take a shot in tournaments, but even then, the spots that I'm taking shots in tournaments with players in this game, they're not dart throws, but they're more sprinkles into your tournament allocation as opposed, guys like Hilton, probably not somebody like Mack. And I don't even know that I want shares of Brissett or Mariota, considering that I don't want to run 10, 12 deep at quarterback in my tournament allocations.
Yeah. Well, Adam is just slacking. I mean, he doesn't want to give out his cash game lineup. He doesn't even mention that Funchess is out. And I'll give you guys a gem. You guys mocked me for all my second and third receivers that, for the most part, went off last week. Thank you very much. And I'll give you another one. Deon Cain, who I think is an absolute stud, was drafting him with my last pick in a ton of drafts. I think he is going to be an absolute monster for this team. Don't love the spot, but with Funchess now gone, I think Deon Cain steps into a role where he can be very, very productive. Adam, you did participate in #preseason. Your thoughts on Deon Cain?
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot that. We had a really good preseason. Did get bit by Daddy on one slate, though, where he had Deon Cain. Daddy had Deon Cain, and we did not have Deon Cain. And that one stung a little bit.
Daddy's sharp.
Yeah, because as you alluded to, I mean, before the injury, Deon Cain was a very highly regarded prospect. And DraftKings left him at stone minimum despite the Funchess injury, which I forgot about. You could just run this pod. You could just ask yourself for the injury notes.
You're just asleep at the wheel, Adam. People come to listen to you. They want the ad reads. They want the news and notes. They want your cash game team. And you just said, you know what? I'm not going to deliver on anything. So, Al, we're going to have to really pick it up here with our next game. We have the Seahawks at Steelers. Adam, are you feeling ready to give some news and notes? Might I suggest Juju Smith-Schuster, who has a toe injury? What's the status there?
Yeah, Tyler Lockett and both Juju are both a little bit banged up. I think they both got in limited practices, or at least Juju did on Wednesday. So I think they're both going to be fine. It didn't sound like Pittsburgh was very worried. And I think from Pittsburgh's point of view, this New England defense, I know a couple of people have said it already. I mean, this could be the best New England defense we've seen in the Tom Brady era. So going up there, Sunday Night Football, week 1, like I'm willing to throw out that performance from the Steelers and think that they'll bounce back and play much better here. And that certainly includes Juju Smith-Schuster, who I know people like all the narrative people who were like, Juju's going to suck without Antonio Brown. And now they're like trying to take their victory lap after one game and arguably be like the toughest possible matchup they'll see all year.
I mean, aside from Juju, you also have Moncrief and Washington, who had amazing opportunity in week 1, both from a target standpoint and air yard standpoint, left points on the table, both of them. So you have value in this Pittsburgh offense with those two at 4K and 3,600 respectively. If you want to pivot off of Smith-Schuster, if you want to double stack with Ben. On the other side, Tyler Lockett, basically after the game, because he was in the witness protection program for the first half in week 1, post-game, he says, they double-teamed me. You're damn right they double-teamed you. Who else is left in the passing game? Of course you're going to see double teams, buddy. Baldwin's gone. Now you're going to get the double teams. And then you got Wilson, who's going to look the other way at DK Metcalf, who I thought looked pretty darn good in his first game, right? Like, he looks like a monster. If Wilson puts the ball on target, he's just bigger than any cornerback that he's going to face. And he's going to put the ball in the right place. Is this the week that Metcalf has an opportunity to break one? Or do we see this Seattle offense scheming for ways to maybe find Lockett in space a little bit more?
Yeah, good question. I mean, Metcalf had 6 targets. I agree with you. Played the majority of snaps, I think around 40 snaps last week, 41 out of 53, I believe. I mean, he is clearly a physical specimen out there. And with Lockett getting a lot of attention and the running game getting attention, I think that's a pretty good call. Going back to the Pittsburgh receivers, Adam, I mean, Dante Moncrief, I don't know what was going on with his hands, but that guy was dropping absolutely everything. So I think that's a pretty good call. Smiz as well. Adam, any thoughts on these secondary receivers in this game?
Yeah, I mean, we should note that Dante Moncrief's playing through a dislocated finger. I don't know if that's why he struggled so bad. He said it was the worst game of his entire life. I mean, he had 7 yards on 10 targets. It's like one of the worst performances in the history of the NFL for a wide receiver. So, yeah, I mean, I'm still optimistic on Moncrief, and I'll be more optimistic on James Washington if we can ever get the shower narrative in play between Mason Rudolph and James Washington, because that's the real moneymaker. And this year in preseason, Mason Rudolph to James Washington was just the stones.
I could not believe that Washington ran out of bounds when he got behind. He caught the ball behind the cornerback, and the safety did not have an angle. He just literally ran out of bounds. At least try to make it, right? Just put the Jets on, go, hold Y, run.
Yeah. Very frustrating for any Steelers fan or people rostering Steelers. In that game, just got embarrassed by New England, and I do think this is a prime bounce back spot at home against the Seahawks team, which is solid, but the Bengals were moving the ball against them, so I do think the Steelers in general are a good buy low team right now. Let's move to the Bills at Giants, and we have some real options in this game, Adam. What are the news and notes?
Yeah, it looks like Sterling Shepard is in the concussion protocol. I'll consider him questionable for now. I mean, they were already so thin with obviously the Odell Beckham trade plus Golden Tate suspension. So that's something to watch. And then on the Bills side, Josh Allen continues to be a good fantasy player. We talked about Josh Allen to John Brown last week. That was like the layup play for Sharps. I don't think that it's quite as good this week just because the Jets, what they do is just get abused on the perimeter and deep. But still, I mean, I think John Brown and Josh Allen all year is going to be a really good play. And yeah, we saw, Devin Singletary kind of take control of the backfield from a snaps perspective. I was surprised they only played TJ Yeldon for 2 snaps. But yeah, I still think that Frank Gore is going to play a ton. I mean, coaches just love to give the ball to Frank Gore. It's just maddening. So we'll see on Singletary. I don't think he's the worst play I've heard, but I still would like to see more.
Al, you have a lot of experience with Frank Gore. Your thoughts on the Bills and the Giants, specifically Saquon Barkley, who somehow looked like even more of a man amongst boys than he did last year.
Yeah, I mean, 120 yards on 11 carries is pretty strong, right? I mean, if you're getting 10.9 yards per carry, you should probably get more than 11 carries in a game. But obviously he sat late in that game because it was an absolute blowout. 4 catches on 6 targets. Barkley's Barkley. We know what we're getting there. Evan Engram, though, 4,800, 11 catches, 14 targets last week. DraftKings has decided to boost him all the way up to 5,200. Not enough. He's still too cheap, at least to me. I mean, if you're talking about tight ends that you think project to have essentially a floor of 8 targets, you're talking about guys like Kelsey, you're talking about guys like Kittle, you're talking about guys maybe like Ertz. You know, in the past, possibly this year, we don't know yet because of Goddard and everything else that Wentz can do spreading the ball around. All those guys are priced at 6,600 and above, all the way up to 7,200 or 7,500. So Engram comes into me again as one of the better values at the tight end position. No, is he 3K? Is he 3,200? Is he 3,800 like some of the other great tight end plays on the board? No, but all of those tight end plays do not have an 8-target floor. They have an 8-target hope. Engram should see anywhere between 8 and 14 targets again, especially if Shepard misses this game with a concussion. He is currently in the concussion protocol. We don't have clarity whether or not he's going to miss. He got it with Shepard there. Latimer also had 10 targets. Engram's just going to be a target monster as long as there are no other bodies to catch the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Engram, Saquon Barkley, definitely monitor the Sterling Shepard news. And Eli actually looked halfway decent in that game. We'll see how long that lasts. Was indoors. Was early on. When Eli starts to get nicked up, he gets even more unathletic and his arm looks worse. So we'll see what transpires. But Engram, very encouraging, great game. Saquon Barkley, to me, looks like a running back I would actually pay. Truly a generational player just from an eye test. And then Buffalo, I think, Adam, you nailed it. And I have a direct question for you again. Josh Allen, 5,300. When you start doing the points per dollars, he is looking really, really strong in cash. We mentioned Lamar Jackson earlier. If you had to choose Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson in cash.
All right, let's move to the next game.
All right. All the listeners, all 7 of you, you guys know you can tweet at Adam Levitan. He really is withholding. He's supposed to be a man of the people. He is not. Let's move to the next game. 49ers at Bengals. And John Ross, boys. I'm going to kick to you first, Al. You said you're never going to play John Ross. Has that changed for you after what you saw last week?
God damn it, John Ross. What am I supposed to do with this guy? Like, now he got 12 targets. Look, it was very, very impressive the way that this new Cincinnati coaching staff was getting him into targets and spots where he can win. The flea flicker play up the left sideline, trying to get him the ball deep, situationally getting him the ball deep, not just run a 9 down the sideline and just chuck it, right? He looked better in the way that he was being utilized. Now, at 4,600, I think he's nothing more than a pivot off of the Gazelle. I'm not playing him over Terrell. So, Adam, how interested are you in John Ross this week? Because to me, the play in this game, if you're playing Bengals, is waiting on Mixon's injury status to see if Giovanni Bernard is going to be the play, because we know what he's done in the absence of Joe Mixon in the past.
Yeah, I alluded to coaching with Kellen Moore. I mean, I think Zach Taylor could have a huge impact on this Bengals team. And obviously they're missing AJ Green right now. They're missing a couple offensive linemen. Like, if they ever got to full strength with Zach Taylor, I think you would see a big difference. And John Ross is certainly a huge beneficiary. So yeah, I'm fine with John Ross. Obviously, as Al alluded to, the story of this game is the injuries at the running back positions. Joe Mixon, questionable day-to-day with an ankle injury, and Tevin Coleman's going to be out. I do think that San Francisco will call up, or they might have already called up Jeff Wilson. So, like, I want to be really high on Matt Breida, who I love. I want to be really high on preseason Hall of Famer Raheem Mostert, who I love. I'm not sure that they're really going to change the usage that much, though, and be like, hey, we're going to give Matt Breida a ton of work because Mostert is good. Jeff Wilson played really well in the preseason. So we'll see on that. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a really, really, really interesting game. San Francisco's defense, the front, is just way better than people realize. They've invested so much draft capital along the front, and I think that's a problem for Cincy's offensive line, just like it was a problem for Tampa's offensive line. But we'll see, man. There's a lot to chew on here.
Yeah, a lot to chew on and a lot to unpack. Starting with John Ross, actually, getting really into the process, I think, Al, you were basically correct. In general, you want to be playing guys that are on the field, and we really didn't have any data to be on John Ross. The reason I thought he was a good play last week and why I was on him in tournaments is because of the draft capital, and specifically because he's the fastest guy in the field. And one thing I've talked a lot about on this podcast over the years is I want exposure to the fastest and most athletic guys on the field. And, that's more of a tournament mindset, which is actually different than how I normally approach things. So I'm actually more on Al's side in general there, and I like to make fun. But John Ross specifically was an outlier because of the draft capital and because he's run the fastest 40 in the history of the NFL.
On the San Francisco side, Ross last week, you don't need to protect me. I was wrong.
No, but I genuinely want to have the conversation because I think one of the hard things about NFL DFS is evaluating talent, opportunity, and I think John Ross specifically, was one of those really talented guys that had never stayed healthy and on an offense that we weren't very optimistic about. So it was a hard thing to pull the trigger on, but specifically looking at these, ridiculous athletes, I think is a good thing for tournaments.
I mean, my error was, if I, sorry to interrupt, Pete.
No, go.
My error was not taking into account the new offense and how he was going to be utilized, right? We have a couple of years of data on John Ross and how he's been rolled out, obviously different coaching staff. I did not think there was any route to 12 targets, right? I was thinking maybe 4, maybe 5 targets, and if he connects on one deep pass, totally utilized differently, and the way that he was being run, totally differently. So I missed there. Totally my fault. I apologize to all 7 of our listeners.
It's hard to, no one could see 12 targets coming. I just think he's a ridiculous athlete. I got really high on him when I saw an interview talking about I have another gear to go to, just clearly feeling healthy. And we saw the same thing from Deshaun Jackson this week, talking about how he has another gear to go to, another uber fast guy that we can chat about. But on the San Francisco side, Adam, the most tilting thing for me by far last week was George Kittle having not 1 but 2 touchdowns overturned because of penalty. His first touchdown was just ridiculous. He still seems like, to me, it's a toss-up to me between Kittle and Kelsey as the number 1 overall tight end. How do you feel about Kittle this week, though, going against the Bengals, which, this is a middling total, and I'm with you. I think San Francisco has a real chance to win with their front versus the Bengals offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, what's going on with San Francisco's wide receiver situation only helps Kill, I mean, this Dante Pettis mess, he only played 2 snaps, and then Deebo Samuel and Richie James and Kendrick Bourne and Marquise Goodwin, they're just not going to scare anybody. So, yeah, I think you can project George Kittle for a really, really safe target share. And, yeah, I mean, he's certainly a fine play.
Okay. All right, let's keep it moving. There's a lot in that game. My first instinct was to stack that game as one of the best kind of under-owned games. But looking more at this 49ers front, I have some concern. Chargers at Lions, feel so bad for the Chargers. They are just dealing with all these awful things. So let's get into Hunter Henry, Mike Williams, and everything that's going on with the Chargers offense, Adam.
Yeah, at this point, I don't even know if it's a coincidence that the Chargers are always having injuries. I mean, it's crazy how many injuries they have every year, before the year, earlier in the year. Hunter Henry's down again. Mike Williams seems doubtful. So, yeah, I mean, this is an interesting game because both teams are coming off overtime games and both teams want to play really slow. We saw what Austin Eckler can do. I mean, Austin Eckler's just such a boss. And I don't think his price was raised enough. I guess you could make the case that Detroit's front is really good, but the way that Phillip Rivers targets running backs is at such a high rate anyways. And now they have, no Kung and all these other offensive line problems, more checkdowns for Austin Eckler, certainly coming. And then, without Henry and without Mike Williams, I mean, behind Keenan Allen, who, is going to see a ton of targets. They have I don't even know, Jeremy Davis. Maybe they'll call up Artavis Scott. They have Travis Benjamin. They have Dontrell Inman. It's a mess. So I think people are going to be interested in this game because you're going to find values on the Chargers side. Obviously, the concern is that it's going to be the slowest game on the board or one of the slowest games on the board.
I mean, look, there's a lot of value wide receivers out there, but in the case that Williams misses, we know that Hunter Henry's got to miss. You got to kind of figure out what y'all want to do. You want to be a baller, a shot callers, brawlers, who'll be dipping in the bends with the spoilers on the low from the Jake and the Torres, trying to get my hands on some grants like Horace. It's all about the Benjamins, baby. I want my shares. His volume's going to go up. You do have the deep threat possibility. He's 3,200. He makes for a fantastic tournament play. He's not going to be a cash game wide receiver for me. If I need to pay low in cash this week, I think there are enough other higher volume guys. Benjamin's going to be a little bit more higher variance type play. You mentioned how much they have to throw short, but that's going to bring safeties up and allow Travis Benjamin at least one shot, if not multiples down the field. And that's where he really excels. You give him more snaps, you give him a higher floor of targets, and now he becomes a very viable tournament play that I think will be able to overweight the field on, because I don't think he's going to carry anything like 15 or 20% ownership. So he'll be easy to overweight the field with.
Yeah, it's a great tournament play if he's not heavily owned, which I don't think he will be with all the really good tournament options. He's just a guy who has great distributions given the type of player that he is. On the other side of the ball, Al, you also did a video on Hawkinson, who I was really high on coming into the year. I think last week just played out perfectly for him, given the overtime, given how Arizona was playing. But this guy is clearly an uber talented tight end. There's a reason the Lions drafted him 8th overall. He's 3,000 on DraftKings, and you have so many good tight end options. You got Austin Hooper at 3,100 and on a bigger slate. You got Evan Ingram, who you mentioned. You got Kittle. You got Kelsey. There's a lot of different ways you can go at tight end. But specifically Hawkinson, Al, you had some points on him, just given that it was a perfect scenario and people might have a lot of recency bias with him this week.
I mean, yeah, there could be recency bias because he had that, 9 target, 6 catch game, caught a touchdown, looked really good doing it as well. The thing that stood out to me the most is that, like, Adam, we talk about snap count a lot. I know you've spoken about this, and it's something that I pay attention to most at tight end, right? We've talked about at quarterback. We don't care about volume. We care about efficiency, right? We want touchdown possibilities. We want good matchups. We want guys that they can exploit in the red zone. Running back is 100% about volume. Wide receiver is all about volume of snaps, volume of targets, and then inclusion in the red zone. With tight ends, it's not so much about how many plays they play, but how many routes they run on their quarterbacks' dropbacks. And you look at TJ Hawkinson, and tight ends have not typically done very well as rookies, but Hawkinson being rolled out in very much a pass-catching role, 48 dropbacks last week for Stafford. He ran around on 34 of those. That's 70.8% of the time, and ended up 12th in the league in week 1. If he continues to run routes on that many of Stafford's dropbacks, and knowing that Stafford's not going to drop back 48 times moving forward, especially if they're playing from ahead, he's going to remain a good target for me. I think he needs to be about 42, 43, 4,400. He's 3,000. Now, do I think he's as good a play as some other players that might be in that same price range? No. But he's still too cheap at $3K.
Adam has no thoughts?
None. He's just rubbing his beard.
I played Hawkinson last week in that tournament lineup. I hate to keep talking about preseason, but he was also jumped off the screen in preseason as just a guy. I think he's just a super talented guy. I think the best possible matchup Arizona will get all year was last week, and I hate to be high. The best possible matchup Detroit will get all year was last week against Arizona, so I hate to be high on Detroit guys coming out of that. But it's hard. I mean, I wish DraftKings would have raised his price more. I'll say that.
Yes.
Yeah. I made the first egregious error referencing someone not on the main slate. And the tight end I wanted to mention in the same price range, who we'll talk about, is Darren Waller, who we'll get to him in a little bit. I think that is the decision, Waller versus Hawkinson, if you're going to go in this price range in cash. And then for tournaments, I think an amazing pivot this week is going to Kenny Golladay or Marvin Jones. No one's going to be on those guys. Everyone's going to be clicking on Hawkinson. And with all the wide receiver value, you can get both those players at extremely low ownership. The pause for concern would just be the pace of play that Adam referenced. All right, moving on.
Hold on. Now it's time to tell the people about Manscaped. Go ahead, Al.
On this podcast, Adam, cleanliness is very important to us, and support for DraftKings this week comes from Manscaped, who is the #1 brand in terms of men's below-the-waist grooming. Adam, did you know that Manscaped creates precision-engineered tools for your family jewels?
Manscaped is forever changing the grooming game with their Perfect Package 2.0. Inside the perfect package, you'll find their electric trimmer called the Lawnmower 2.0. This waterproof trimmer features skin-safe technology
Stay in character, Adam!
And will protect you.
This waterproof trimmer features skin-safe technology and will protect you from nicking your sack. You can also create less mess by trimming in the shower. It's time to get clean with this Perfect Package 2.0. Get 20% off of your entire order with free shipping with the code DRAFT20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. And use DRAFT20 now. Your balls will thank you.
In all seriousness, you got some free socks. Can I get some free Manscaped stuff? Ashley will, this is how I'm going to compete with Daniel Sanders.
Yeah, it's going to help Peter get that extra optical inch. It's perfect.
Honestly, I thought it was all fun and games, all the bits about the team sex and gender lads, but this is the best. This is really the best.
You think I'm joking? I'm dead serious. I want a free Manscaped.
Yeah.
You got socks. This is how, the shower. That's perfect.
Listen,
if ever, you know what this was? We got this sponsor, and thank you to manscaped.com for sponsoring the podcast. The fine folks at manscaped.com. All the talk about shower narrative is what got this absolutely outstanding product that is waterproof and can be used in the shower. So shower narrative in play now with the on-air reads. Moving right along.
I'm dead serious, Manscaped. Hit me up at CSURAM88. I will be a huge endorser for you. That caught me off guard. I'm not going to lie. I thought we were doing that before the 4 o'clock game, so my bad, fellas. Anything else on Manscaped, or can we move to the next game?
Yeah, Pete, please, no picks.
Manscaped, hit me up. I'm dead serious. All right, Vikings at Packers. Adam, the Packers defense, everyone saw them. They played the first game of the NFL season, did extremely well versus the Bears, and Aaron Rodgers was just glowing about how good the defense was after the game. Now at home versus this Vikings team, which #established the run last week. What are the news and notes, and how do you see this game playing out?
Yeah, imagine throwing the ball 10 times in a game and winning. I mean, it's so weird. But Steph Diggs is healthy now, off the injury report. I know there's people have talked about the splits with Steph Diggs when he's on the injury report and when he's not. He's not this week. I don't think the Green Bay defense is going to be anything special. I just think Trubisky just can go from a bottom 10% quarterback to a top 10% quarterback at any time, and it just kind of is what it is. So yeah, this is an interesting game. Obviously, Minnesota's going to throw way more than they did last week. I think that would make Thielen and Diggs interesting. And yeah, I mean, we know it's not as good of a spot for Dalvin Cook, but I think it's certainly a fine spot, and he'll probably go overlooked because there's some really standout running back plays on this slate.
And people have seen a 20% price hike in Dalvin Cook, and it's like for a month, they've essentially seen, Dalvin Cook is $6K. That's the price that Dalvin Cook is. And now $7,200, now it's a situation where people might look at that and get a little bit of sticker shock. Not that that's the right way to look at it, but I think he's in play. I don't think he's a cash game play this week. I don't think you need him for cash this week. I think there's other opportunities at running back that we can get to very easily without going with Dalvin Cook, but I'm going to have shares in tournaments. Now, I don't know that I want any of the tight ends in this game. Obviously, much better options out there. Wide receivers. Devontae Adams, one of my favorite guys to roster on a week-in, week-out basis, but Pete, are you afraid that the roads will be closed?
He's done all right versus Rhodes, putting up touchdowns in bunches versus him. Not really huge ceiling games, but been very efficient and has scored a lot of touchdowns. So I think Devontae Adams is firmly in play. The guy that I'm most interested in the Packers from a GPP standpoint would be MVS, who looked electric on Thursday against what I believe is one of the best defenses still for sure in the Bears, and I think that's consensus. So I was encouraged with his usage, and I think if you are concerned about Rhodes, then MVS is your guy. And then Aaron Jones, I think people are not going to be looking at him at all considering what happened versus the Bears. But the reason he didn't play as many snaps is because the Packers really needed help in pass protection, which is why Jamal Williams played a lot more. But if you look at what the Packers did in terms of running the football, I think Aaron Jones had 13 of the 18 rushes. I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but Aaron Jones is still going to be the guy that's going to be running the football. And while this is not the best matchup, I am still high on Aaron Jones going forward. So might be a good chance to get him under 5% owned. Adam, your thoughts on Aaron Jones?
Yeah, it's certainly not the right matchup, but that's why you're right. He's going to be extremely low owned. And yeah, I mean, I still think they want Aaron Jones to be their feature back. Him and Devontae Freeman would be, if I played season long, I think Devontae Freeman and Aaron Jones would probably be a couple targets, even though Aaron Jones' schedule is really rough.
I mean, if you had 5,500 left and last man into your lineup was a running back, you're not clicking Aaron Jones, right? I mean, I'm talking about from a contrarian point of view, from a tournament play point of view. If you got 5,500 and want a running back, you're clicking, if Mixon is out, you're clicking Bernard, you're clicking Breida, you're clicking James White because you know what his role is, or you're clicking Duke Johnson. You're not clicking, nobody is clicking Aaron Jones this week. He should get the goal line work. Minnesota is tough, but this game is at home in Green Bay. He does have some big playability. And as you said, under 5%, I think under 3%. Under, possibly 2% owned on this kid who's got big time upside. He does have 20-point upside even against Minnesota.
Yeah, Aaron Jones, Packers defense, contrarian correlation play for sure. And the Vikings offensive receivers, I think, are nice pivots as well. Mostly just a tournament game here. Moving to the Jaguars at Texans, Deshaun Watson is just a straight baller. It's just O'Brien is an absolute donkey. But Watson, I just love watching this kid play. He's probably my favorite player in the NFL to watch at this point. Jaguars obviously coming off a big loss, and they lose Nick Foles. Adam, news and notes. We don't like to see BDN, out for so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not great. Gardner Minshew is going to start for the Jaguars, and he played well in the preseason. I played him at least once, I think. And he came in just cold off the bench and played pretty well last week.
Played very well.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a downgrade from Nick Foles. I don't think it's a massive downgrade. I think they're only like a 3-point dog in Houston. Do I have that right? And that doesn't sound right. They must be a bigger dog than that.
That's way off.
Yeah, it's like 7-point dog.
I mean, Adam,
I think it's like 9, right?
Podcast?
What is it, 10.5?
You won't give the cash game team lineups. You miss bunches. Oh, yeah. Jaguars 3-point dog.
I was thinking about the other stupid AFC South game, the Tennessee Indy game. That's 3. What's the Jacksonville Houston line?
9.5. Yeah. Good job.
I mean, what would the line be with Foles, do you think?
7?
Yeah, 6.5 maybe.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think it's that huge of a downgrade to Minshew. It's certainly a downgrade. But, obviously when you roster Houston guys, you want the offense to be able to keep up on the other side, just like we saw on Monday night with the Saints. And that's how you get these huge games. So we'll see. It's obviously nothing like the Saints game. From an injury perspective, I would know Kiki Kute was back practicing full. And we'll see Jalen Ramsey shadow DeAndre Hopkins yet again in week 17 last year. Week 17.
You still thinking about that Manscaped ad, huh?
What's your problem?
Nothing.
My problem?
Yeah.
I'm getting excited. I want to play Will Fuller in this game.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we saw what happened last week, and obviously it didn't quite go as the way people who played Sammy Watkins thought it would go, but you do get these situations when Jalen Ramsey is shadowing one guy to secondary, you certainly have more chances. So yeah, Will Fuller, despite the presence of Kenny still playing on almost every snap, he'll certainly be in play.
There's a possibility that Deshaun Watson breaks this slate, especially with everybody being on Lamar and a large chunk of the population being on Patrick Mahomes because he's Patrick Mahomes. Deshaun Watson, great matchup here. Jacksonville has a tough defense, but last year they allowed the most QB rushing yards in the league with 471. They allowed the most quarterback rushing touchdowns. At least they were tied for first in the league, or worst in the league in that category. And Deshaun Watson ran the ball 20 times against him in his 2 games against Jacksonville. You can pair him with his wide receiver, DeAndre Hopkins. Pete's going to pair him with Will Fuller because, he's got a fetish. But Hopkins in week 17 last year, 12 catches, 147 yards, both the most that Jacksonville surrendered to any player in 2018, and he was playing against Ramsey. So, yes, wide receiver cornerback matchups matter. Yes, they have 2 very good cornerbacks, both of whom got roasted and toasted last week by Sammy Watkins. But DeAndre Hopkins is a different sort of animal. He's going to see 35% of the target share from Watson. So if Watson has a big day, Hopkins also likely to have a big day. And if Hopkins has a big day, very likely that Watson has a big day. So to me, they're my top quarterback pass catcher pairing for this week.
I love Will Fuller. Just getting to the same John Ross, Tyreek Hill. I'm a sucker for the fastest guy on the field. And even after all these injuries, Will Fuller to me is going to be the fastest guy in the field. For the last couple of years, I think he's recorded the fastest time in terms of raw miles per hour with the chips and the shoulder pads. So I like Will Fuller a lot in this game, in the same kind of situation as Sammy Watkins was last week. And then on the Jacksonville side, a lot to be encouraged about with Leonard Fournette. He's clearly the workhorse here, and I think he could be heavily involved. Another guy I definitely want exposure to in tournaments. And then D.D. Westbrook was chalk, but Shark was the guy that you really needed if you wanted to win tournaments with like a Mahomes-Watkins stack. Running it back with Shark was the guy. Adam, have you looked much into how the receivers break down? D.D. Westbrook's still a good play, but Shark really did well last week.
Yeah. I think Marquise Lee might come back and play a little bit more this week. I think he got like 10 or 11 snaps last week. So we'll see on Marquise Lee. I would expect the primaries on the outside to still be Conley and Shark. I think people just aren't going to play it because they're afraid of Minshew and they think Minshew is total dust, which I'm not sure I agree with. But Minshew, I think, is more likely to throw short than Big Dick Nick. Big Dick Nick likes to get it out there deep and Minshew.
Damn it. We're off the
he
rails.
Likes to go deep. He likes to go deep.
And Minshew
Producer
is more
Luke,
likely
can you please get the explicit tag ready?
And Minshew's more likely to keep it short.
Adam can't keep track of the news and notes. He's just thinking about Big Dick Nick going deep. Love it. Leonard Fournette firmly in play, and Deshaun Watson. We are, as football fans, we are lucky to be watching two generational guys, in my opinion. Watson and Mahomes are just absolute ridiculous quarterbacks. And in this next game, we have arguably the greatest quarterback, Tom Brady, who somehow they showed the picture of him 20 years ago, and then now
the combine
he's
picture.
Much better looking now in his 40s than he was in his 20s, which is just mind blowing. And you have just a crazy, crazy spot here. We have the Patriots going into Miami, where the Patriots have historically played really bad. Tom Brady plays a lot of golf when he goes down to Florida. I don't know what happens, but Miami has always played this Patriots team really tough. But this Miami team has given up, and the Patriots are 18.5-point favorites at home, or on the road. 18.5-point favorites on the road in Miami. This is just a very peculiar spot. We have Antonio Brown, which I don't want to get too much into all the news on Antonio Brown.
He's practicing. That's the news.
Yeah, it's just you can get that today. Antonio Brown news elsewhere. But Adam, what are we doing here? This is a crazy, crazy situation, and I just have no idea what to expect.
Yeah, and I'd also note that a lot of Miami's coaching staff has New England ties. 19-point road favorite. I'd rather lose than bet a 19-point road favorite. That's for sure. If I was going to bet this game, it would for sure be Miami. I don't know, though. If Antonio Brown does not end up playing in this game, we know Julian Edelman and Josh Gordon are going to see majority of the targets. We know that DraftKings left Philip Dorsett at 3K, and the obvious bounce back candidate, the game script that everybody expects it to go, is for Sony Michel to just absolutely smash. And actually, before last week, I thought that one of the talent points on Miami was actually in the secondary, but they got shredded by Lamar and Hollywood. So yeah, I think Sony Michel is on paper the guy who would be featured and rack up points here, but they can probably do whatever they want, I would guess.
But it wasn't in week one. In week one, in the second half, the mop-up duty all went to Rex Burkhead.
Yep.
So are we sure that Michelle is going to be the LeGarrette Blount mop-up guy when they're up 2 touchdowns, or is Sexy Rexy going to come in there with his 8 targets, 5 catches, and 8 carries in the second half and just make people flip tables who rostered Sony Michel? Mm-hmm. If I'm playing a running back on New England this week, I want James White.
This is a classic spot. Patriots implied for 33.5 points. Nowhere, you have no idea where to go. Tom Brady, has not played well in these games. Game script certainly doesn't project to go his way, but he could still do really well. Josh Gordon looked awesome. Antonio Brown, if he does play, they're going to look for him deep to try to get him a touchdown, keep him happy. You got Julian Edelman, and then the Dolphins. They have to show some pride here. One guy that I'm interested in is Kenyon Drake. who did not have a good week one, but I expect him, especially if they're down, to be a king of garbage time. The guy catches a ton of passes, and last year had multiple ceiling games where they were playing from behind. So he's someone I'm looking at. I want to see Preston Williams do something as a CSU guy. I don't know. This game, I'm so confused by this game. I have no idea where to go. I'm with Adam. I think the most natural way to think about it is Sony Michel big-time bounce-back game, but if everyone's thinking that way, then it's not a good play either. So I'm totally lost out.
Adam, do you love the Drake or do you hate the Drake?
Hate the Drake.
Hate the Drake.
Why do you hate the Drake?
Does not get the reference at all.
It's another Seinfeld
Way
bit.
over my head. Way over it. Any other thoughts?
Here's the thoughts. Here's my thoughts.
Adam just goes dead silent when we get
always.
to like, oh,
Adam over there with his
thoughts?
Baker Mayfield beard. Can you say something, Adam?
I said I hate the Drake. What do you want from me?
All right. Here's my thoughts. Yes, it does look like New England's going to play this game with a big lead, right? So if they get that big lead, and I'm not saying they're going to go out and score 50 whatever points like Baltimore did last week, but if they get a big lead, it's going to be on the backs of Tom Brady and the passing game, right? Yes, Sony Michel might do what he did in the playoffs last year and run 2 first-half touchdowns in, or Burkhead or whatever. But realistically speaking, think about how they handled that Pittsburgh game. They were up. They're going to throw the entire first half, no matter what happens. They find one weak spot. They're just going to continue to exploit it and exploit it and exploit it and exploit it. If I'm playing players in this game, I want guys that are known entities. We don't know how many snaps Antonio Brown's going to play. When Antonio Brown is on the field, I expect that he's going to be the primary or secondary receiver. They're not going to run him out there in the 50% or whatever of snaps that they're going to run him out there in the first week that he's on the team to just have him be a decoy. I can't see that happening. They're going to get him the ball in some winnable situations where he can do some things, but he's not going to get a full complement, at least not in the first half, if this game stays somewhat not out of hand. I don't know how to put that, right? But like, if I'm buying shares of players in this game, it's going to be Brady, it's going to be Edelman, it's going to be White. I want to go where I know the ball is going to go. We know what White's role is. We know Edelman is indefensible on drag routes because he's always freaking open. Yes, you could get a long touchdown to Gordon. Yes, you could get a long touchdown to Dorsett or whatever. And maybe Antonio Brown does something in the limited work that I project that he's going to have in this week if he practices fully today and Friday as we're recording this on Thursday morning. I don't want any shares of the Miami Dolphins. I don't like that, as Pete said, like usually you talk about teams quitting, it's in week 15 or 16. They had guys calling their agents after week 1, get me the hell out of here.
Yeah.
And Adam can talk to us about the sports book and whether or not he's going to bet Miami at home and take the 3 touchdowns.
I'm not going to bet. My only point is that, like, 19-point road favorite, I'd just rather lose. It's embarrassing to lay that much wood.
All right. Let's get to a game where we might get something out of Adam. We might get one of his cash game plays. It's possible. We have the Chiefs at Raiders. Raiders were impressive. I was the most wrong I've been about an NFL game in a long time with the Raiders and Broncos. Obviously a little bit of bias, but I really thought this Broncos front, specifically Chubb and Von Miller, were just going to be way too much for the Raiders to handle, and their offensive line played great. Derek Carr looked good with all their options, even with the whole Antonio Brown drama. Derek Carr's interview after the game I thought was just awesome. I respect Derek Carr so much just as a leader, and really, really great game from the Raiders to beat the Broncos. Now they face the Chiefs at home, and this is obviously a spot that everyone's expecting to shoot out. Mahomes, all this talk about him regressing is nonsense. The guy is just, he's a generational player. At this point, we've seen enough of a sample. He's just ridiculous. So a lot of points projected here. Adam, I can see you're ready to either make fun of me or you're ready to give out some cash game plays.
No, I'm just laughing because like the whole analytics Twitter would be just roasting you for using the word generational so many times. It's
like 8 times this
podcast.
podcast.
I used it about 2 guys, and I'm consistent on it. I think Deshaun Watson. But about 2 guys.
Saquon, you say Saquon.
Oh, that's true.
I need producer Luke to go back in and put like a little bell and a generational counter on the screen.
Who else did I say? Those 3. I agree with those 3. Who else?
Mahomes, Watson, and Saquon, right?
Yeah.
And Hopkins.
Hold on any of those.
Hopkins.
I like Hopkins. Ross.
John Ross has generational speed.
He does. Fastest 40 ever.
Yeah, I mean,
But
obviously
in all seriousness, Mahomes, though, like, everyone's like, oh, he's going to regress. Like, there's no way. And yeah, maybe he doesn't have the exact same season, but the guy is a freak.
Yeah. No, I think
the regression talk is just about his touchdown percentage. That's all. I think that's really what he's amazing. It's not saying that he's going to be bad. It's just those appear to be unsustainable numbers from a metrics point of view. Like, I understand both sides, but like maybe this offense is just unbeatable, but we're about to find out, because my trepidation with Patrick Mahomes coming into this season was the fact that Tyreek Hill was going to be gone, and they can't replicate that, not even with Mecole Hardman. The question is, with Mecole Hardman at the price that he's at, you know, they bumped him up to 4,800. Is he even playable at 4,800? Because he is not a Tyreek Hill clone. Yes, he is the same height. Yes, he runs a similar 40, but he is not the same guy in terms of contested catch rate. In fact, they're polar opposites, and he is not the same guy in terms of beating press coverage. They are polar opposites in that as well. And Tyreek Hill saw as much press coverage as any other wide receiver in the league last year. So if teams defense Mecole Hardman on the other side, and he did see twice as many snaps as Robinson did post Tyreek Hill injury in week 1, I don't see a route for Mecole Hardman to be Tyreek Hill. That doesn't mean he can't get deep and catch one if he gets open, but he's not the same wide receiver, can't beat press coverage, does not have good contested catch rate. This offense may start to struggle, which for this offense means 30 points.
Yeah.
We've been doing the heavy lifting here on this podcast. Adam, there's
hard carry. Hard carry.
The Raiders.
Give us something, Adam.
The pricing came out after their performance. You can break that down. All the Chiefs injuries. I expect a good 5 minutes, and I expect breaking down points per dollar who your favorite plays are.
Yeah, I'll start on Mecole Hardman. The way that I think he would win would not be over the top, which he certainly can do. But in the way, at least in the preseason, he was just like smoking dudes on crossing routes and just going to the house with 4.33 speed. And yeah, I think they're going to scheme him the ball. I really do think that Mecole Hardman has like a floor of 3 to 4 catches just on screens, bubble screens, quick hitters, and just let him try to go. So anything on top of that would be a bonus. I should note that the Chiefs did get DeAnthony Thomas back from suspension. There was rumors in The Athletic that DeAnthony Thomas and Mecole Hardman would now share the role that Tyreek had. I don't know if I buy that. I think Mecole is obviously way, way better than DeAnthony Thomas, but, Chiefs have done some interesting things with personnel before. And on the Oakland salaries, I mean, this, what we're going to talk about the New Orleans guys in a little bit. But really what got messed up was Oakland playing so much better than expected, and the salaries already coming out, and Oakland playing a home game against Kansas City. I mean, the last 2 times that Derek Carr has played Kansas City at home, he's absolutely shredded them. I mean, ridiculous. That's what happens. You get Darren Waller at 3,300. You get Tyrell at 4,400. You get Josh Jacobs at 4,700. I mean, all these guys like massively owned, like Oakland Chalk Week. Like, what could go wrong, Peter, with Oakland Chalk Week? It's like, I don't know. It seems like a lower floor maybe than people realize. But if Derek Carr plays well, then they're all going to smash at those salaries.
One thing that consistently makes me happy year after year is the Tyrell the Gazelle gif for Smith. Are we going to be seeing the gif this week, Smith?
I mean, I hope so. We saw it last week. And apologies for not immediately getting that up, but I had daddy duty and I was putting my kids to sleep when he scored a touchdown. So Tyrell, please, if you could time your touchdowns when I'm at my desk, that would be greatly appreciated. I do have my new Gazelle shirt on the way, though. I can't wait for that to get here. I hope it gets here by Sunday. The Raiders are just too cheap, right? It's that Monday night hangover DraftKings pricing thing, right? Where like if they play on Monday night, then the prices for the next week's slate come out before those games have played. So typically speaking, those players don't get priced up or down. They just kind of hang out where they were. So like Waller is where he was. He's 3,300. And talking about like the conversation that we were having about tight end routes, right? Like with Hawkinson running a route on 70% of the dropbacks, right? Waller ran a route on 23 of 27 dropbacks for Carr last week, 85%, second in the league in terms of routes run per dropback for a tight end. Now you're going to have a different sort of game script. And you've got Derek Carr, who has done actually very, very well on an overall QB rate. I forget the exact tweet. I'm trying to find it, right? But it was Reeves tweeted this out, at Lord Reeves, friend of the podcast, Rich Rebar. Carr has been the QB4 and QB2 in overall weekly scoring his last 2 home games against Kansas City. It's going to force more dropbacks. You're going to get more plays when you play Kansas City. You can't score field goals and expect to beat Kansas City. You got to get it into the house. So if he's going to throw the ball 35 to 40 times and Waller is still going to run routes on 85% of those dropbacks, 3,300 is absurdly cheap. Jacobs, 4,700. My only question, and I think this is a question that's on the mind of everybody, is he going to have any inclusion in the pass game? Because he was really on the field and handled, 90% plus of the running back touches last week for the Raiders. Again, different game flow in that game. Is this game flow going to put Richard more on the field, or is Jacobs actually going to see some usage in the pass game, Adam?
Good question. We don't know because he's obviously a rookie and they played so well on Monday nights. So yeah, I honestly don't know. I'm not doing the bit now. I really don't know. I'll have to look at it.
Like, what if he gets frozen out just a little bit? What if they get down 10 points, the Raiders, right? They're playing from behind, and Jacobs is now supplanted on the field because of game flow and extra dropbacks and predictable passing situations for Jalen Richard. And now he's not the guy who's out there. What we do know is that he is going to be the workhorse inside the 20 and inside the 5, led the league last week in week 1 in terms of red zone opportunities with 8 of them. They should be inside the red zone a few times this week unless Kansas City's defense suddenly shows up. He at least will get those touches and those carries because that's what they're going to do when they get inside there. My only question is, can he be a guy who gets 4 or 5 targets in this game, or is he going to get 1 target? Pete?
Yeah, it's a really good question, really tough. And I know the podcast is going long. We have no buys, a lot to unpack here. And I think staying on this game is still relevant. Highest total of any game as we record here on Thursday, half point higher than the Saints at Rams on the main slate. A lot of questions that you posed are really relevant. And going back to Kansas City, I think Hardman is a very interesting play. I'm higher on him than most. Watched a lot of the preseason, drafted him quite a bit. Again, I want guys who are really fast, and that's what he is. Watkins, coming off an incredible game, highest scoring player on the slate, looked amazing. And he was, one of the most regarded receivers coming out of college, out of Clemson, finally healthy and looked awesome. And a guy that I think that might be overlooked in this game because of the cheap tight end options is Kelsey, Al. Let's pull out the flow charts here. What do we think? What do we think about Kelsey on the flow chart versus Oakland?
He's in play every week, but the smart guy says play a cheaper tight end this week.
That's what the smart guy, I think that's what the consensus is going to be. And I think optimal lineups from, points per dollar standpoint are going to be that. So might make sense in tournaments to pivot. Adam,
I'm never fading Kelsey. This podcast will never tell you fade Travis Kelsey. That's just not what we do here.
Yeah. Adam, who's your cash game quarterback or tight end?
Remember how much money we used to lose playing Rob Gronkowski when he was like 7K?
Yeah.
In cash, you mean?
I think it's tough in cash.
Yeah, in cash, I don't think it's the right move. But in tournaments, I think he's always in play.
Yeah.
He had 3 end zone targets in week 1 and walked away with 0 touchdowns. That led the league.
Mahomes had him wide open. I lost my mind.
I know.
He missed it.
I know. No, and he got shoestring tackled on his way in on another one. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying this is a topic for another day, but just the way the tight end salaries are structured on DraftKings is different than the other positions.
I think if you're making projections and you're running an optimizer, Kelsey and Kittle are not going to pop in any of the teams because of the value at tight end.
Yeah, you got to boost them and limit them. Yeah.
Yeah. I think tournaments, they're really viable. All right, we spent a lot of time on that game, but it is going to be the chalky game and a ton of viable options. Let's move to another game that is right there as one of the chalkiest games on the slate. The totals actually come down from the original open. Haven't tracked the line movement specifically this week, but sitting at 52, we have the Saints at Rams. And Adam, what are the news and notes here?
Yeah, I think both teams came out of their week 1 games healthy. We saw what the Rams wanted to do with Todd Gurley, and that was mix in Malcolm Brown a lot and not play Darrell Henderson very much. We saw Malcolm Brown play in the red zone inside the 5, but down the end, like fourth quarter, crunch time, it was more Gurley. People are going to be scared to play Todd Gurley. I mean, everybody sees the snap counts. They understand what the Rams are doing now. And then obviously the other issue with Monday night pricing was that DraftKings did not have a chance to adjust Alvin Kamara's price. So we have Alvin Kamara at 8,200. Would prefer this game to be in the Superdome, obviously, but it still sets up really well for a back and forth game where they really need him, just like a back and forth game where they really needed him against the Texans.
I mean, you're not going to find, this is not the house where I'm going to bring slander to Alvin Kamara. This is
generational.
This is a house where we stan Alvin Kamara. Any Alvins in the league, I am a fan. I'm in. I mean, he's amazing. What do you want me to tell you? You know,
generational.
Tell him he's generational.
I'll just say this: on his games where he has gotten at least 20 touches in his career, he's averaging 30.9 DraftKings points per game. Pete?
Well, okay, not to get, it's a little off topic, but it's very related. It's about Alvin Kamara, and I posted this on Twitter during the summer. Kamara is a big neurology guy, which I have a ton of respect for. We've talked a little bit about working out and different things on podcasts in the past, and the stuff that he's doing, I think, is next level, and it showed on the field. I mean, his balance is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, he's standing on those like balls and catching, catch the red one, catch the white one. That's an awful explanation, but you can see it on my Twitter. I'll post it again. He's doing next level stuff with his body, and I think it just shows. He's one of the most electric players in the NFL. He has a great role, and it's going to be extremely hard to fade him in any format. Michael Thomas, another guy who was awesome on Monday night, but did not find the end zone, didn't end up having a huge game. In DraftKings, he did a lot better because he got over 100 yards and had a ton of catches. But what do we think about Michael Thomas this week, Adam? It's a heavy price to pay at receiver, but he should do really well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Michael Thomas and Drew Brees is, like, you're not going to get, like, 50-yard plays down the field. Like, he doesn't throw deep. Michael Thomas doesn't run deep routes. But
not an air yards guy.
Yeah, I mean, the catch percentage is just so high. It is what it is. He absolutely torched the Rams in that game.
PPR 100 yards. I mean, like, he's just gonna eat. Like, even without a touchdown, it's like there's 20 points right there, like an average game.
Yep. No, totally agree. I would play him over high. It sounds like Al wants to play Nuke over Thomas. I would prefer Thomas to Nuke this week, I think.
I think Thomas is a perfect pivot off of both. I think that Thomas is a perfect pivot at the same position. Say that 5 times fast, Adam. You couldn't do the read in the middle of the podcast. Try saying that. I think he's a perfect pivot off of Hopkins. I also think he's a perfect pivot off of Kamara to get double leverage. He's a double leverage play, Adam.
Adam doesn't care.
He's going to be owned. Can a leverage play be owned? He's going to be owned hard.
I mean, I don't think he's going to be owned as hard as you'd think. I think people are going to pay up for the running backs. I think that there's going to be other wide receivers. People are playing at least 2 value wide receivers this week.
No, I know, but you think that Hopkins... Hold on. You think Hopkins will be more owned than Michael Thomas?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to try to get my hat back from you. I'll bet you on that.
You never sent the hat in the first place.
I know. No matter what happens, you're not getting the hat.
You don't want that hat. That hat. I mean, every time I see it,
I want it for the general principle. I want it in my hand so that he knows he doesn't have it.
I got a new one though. For you guys, anybody watching the video, I got a white Cincinnati Reds hat.
Oh, they know.
That's nice. It's gonna look bad in about 9 years when you freaking. I mean, that Bullets hat. I mean, it might be the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Let's talk to the Rams, though. Jared Goff is really cheap. Adam will not discuss if he's in his cash game or not. I'm not even going to ask. We have the pass-catching guys for the Rams as well. I mean, Cooks, Woods, Kupp, all those guys will probably be low-owned considering how many really good options we have. Deciphering between those three is challenging. Adam, any stats or anything you're looking at to figure out who to play? I mean, you do have the revenge narrative for Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, and, we saw, not that it mattered too much or mattered at all, but Marshawn Lattimore traveled a lot with DeAndre Hopkins. You typically want to pick on the other, the slots, PJ Williams and whatnot for the Saints. But, I think people get paralyzed with the Rams wide receivers. They just don't know who to click. So a lot of times they end up clicking no one. I'd be fine with any of them in tournaments for sure.
I think, okay, I prefer Cup, then Cooks, then Woods, but the gap between them is not huge, as Adam alluded to.
Thank you for answering the question, Al. I really appreciate that, as do the listeners. Let's move to the game that, we have the team that just absolutely shattered my heart. We had the Bears at Broncos as the last game. Literally lost my entire life savings on Emmanuel Sanders, breaking my heart for like the 100th time. You got a really bad game from a DFS perspective. I wish we had the sad piano because I would just cry about Emmanuel Sanders. Literally, I just can't get any worse. Ashley just going nuts about how great he is, how I didn't draft him at all throughout the season, and then I didn't play him on the 2-game slate. It was... It's bad, boys. So any therapy, any ideas? Do we have anything here, boys? Because I have one play in this game. But Emmanuel Sanders, I need some help.
It's a long week for the Bears after getting embarrassed. I think they'll come back and play better. I think Denver will play better than they did also. But it's just two defenses I think are pretty good. And Allen Robinson is a straight baller. I never have any problem playing Allen Robinson. But it should be another depressing game for you, Pete.
Are they actually going to keep forcing the ball to Allen Robinson the way they did in week 1 in that Island game?
They should. Penn State.
Good analysis.
All right, I'll get into some analysis since Adam is just, it's rough. It's tough. It's tough here on the DFS Edge. Let me tell you one guy who was slandered on the DFS Edge this summer, which was just an egregious bad take. Cortland Sutton is a baller. 7 catches on 8 targets for 120 yards. I liked what I saw, Al.
Call out Harmon. Do it. Do it.
I love the podcast.
Call him out.
He had one really bad take. Said Cortland Sutton stinks. He's good. I like.
He did have a good game. 7 of 8. 7 of 8 for 120. Couldn't score against the Raiders though.
No, they just tossed it to Emmanuel Sanders for a 1-yard touchdown to just absolutely break me. Unbelievable, this guy. 5 catches, 86 yards, and a touchdown, all in the 4th quarter for Emmanuel Sanders. Yeah, crushed me. Did you play Emmanuel Sanders, Adam?
No, sir. What did I play at wide receiver? God, I played Thomas.
The 2-game slate.
Thomas, Hopkins, and Tyrell the Gazelle. How could you play anything else?
All right, well, the most anticlimactic ending for a game, literally the game you want to fade.
Don't end it. Don't end it. David Montgomery, 6 carries in week 1. How egregious is that? On a scale of 0 to Matt Harmon's Cortland Sutton take, how egregious?
Nothing can be as egregious.
And all of them to the left.
Sutton.
He ran left. He's the Zoolander of running backs. He's not an ambi runner. Can we at least mix in a run up the middle or to the right, coach?
Yeah. Could play the Denver defense. I don't know how Denver's defense was so bad versus Oakland. Give credit to Carr for getting the ball out so quickly. They clearly schemed that up, and the offensive line played well. I wanted to play Denver's defense here, but man, I don't know. Montgomery, I'm off. That seems pretty thin now. You're on it?
No, I'm not saying. I'm asking for a friend. Do you think that they're going to continue to run him this way? Or do you think that they're actually going to act like sensible human beings on a sideline with headsets and not just run him 6 times to the left?
I think Mike Davis is better than other people do. That was my whole thing.
I think Mike Davis is good. I'm not saying that he's bad.
Yeah.
Could be a Tariq Cohen game too, but yeah. Trubisky has broken slates before. I'm sure some of the tournament guys might fire him up. Just a brutal total here, so I'm going to stay away.
Tariq Cohen's actually an interesting call.
Yeah. I think Cohen,
you play him at running back. He's essentially a wide receiver at this point. 50 snaps, all at wideout. 10 targets.
I hope the Bears stink it up again on offense, and then when we have a good matchup, Trubisky to Allen Robinson. That's going to be a big winner at some point. So, Al, you're going to have to get us out of here. Adam is, he's
Listener
He's
League.
a veg.
Talk about the Listener League.
Go join that Listener League. Now's the time when Adam tells me to talk about the Listener League. We've reached that point of the podcast. Go to DKPlaybook.com. Find the Edge homepage. It's a big button on the right-hand side says Edge in all orange letters. Click that. Takes you to the homepage. It is also the Pat Mayo podcast homepage. Click on the Daily Fantasy Edge podcast. What are you doing?
I'm marrying
Click
Adam.
on the Listener League. Get yourself in there. 3 entry max. Best tournament on DraftKings. 100K flat payouts. If it doesn't fill, they're going to make it smaller. You want that best tournament to stay there all year? That means you got to get up in there and get involved. So thank you guys for listening once again. For Pete, for producer Luke, for Jerry, for the corpse of Adam Levitan, who is sleepwalking through podcasts so far, I'm Al. If we don't win a GPP, we hope that you guys do. We'll catch you next week. Bye.
We are promoters at DraftKings and also avid fans. Our usernames are Adam Levitan, Al Smizzle, and CSU Ram 88. We may sometimes play on our personal accounts in the games that we offer advice on. Although we have expressed our personal view on the games and strategies in this podcast, they do not necessarily reflect the views of DraftKings, and we also may deploy different players and strategies than what we recommended in this podcast.